Next, we move on to the first keynote speaker of today. We have Dr. Raj Vedam, who is going to be presenting his keynote address very shortly after I give all of you his short bio. Dr. Raj Vedam obtained his PhD degree in electrical engineering from Oregon State University in USA in 1994. He has over 26 years of experience in diverse industries, including power, aircraft, electronic design, automation, oil and gas. As a scientist, Dr. Vedam has been keenly interested in tracing the roots of modern sciences, mathematics, and technology, a quest that led him to study the histories of Babylon, Greece, Egypt, Rome, China, Mitanni, and Arabs. His findings directly contradict the Western narrative, which positions the Indian civilization as having received wisdom on math and science from outside India, and using several sources shows ancient India as the progenitor of knowledge systems in every conceivable field and of endeavor. Dr. Vedam believes that an evidence-based narrative of Indian history is urgently needed to correct the damaging mainstream narrative of Indian history. To that end, he has co-founded a think tank called Indian History Awareness and Research based in Houston, with a mission to popularize the findings. Since 2015, he has delivered over 100 talks in US and Indian universities and public events. His team worked with many educational agencies in Indian and US to review and revise the Indian history textbooks for the content on Indian history. He has conducted a dozen history workshops for high school teachers in India in various cities and spoken at many youth camps and webinars. His YouTube videos have been seen by millions of viewers. I welcome Dr. Raj Vedam. Dr. Vedam, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Namaste and pranams to everybody. It's a great privilege to be here in this very august audience, and I am deeply humbled and very happy to be here. I hope you can see my screen now. So today I am going to talk about the issue of the Indian identity, or more broadly, the Hindu identity. And in contrast to some of the talks we've been hearing, very upbeat and very good, by its very nature, this talk is going to look at some of the not so nice aspects of how our identity has been defined, not by us, but by others, and how it has been used as a weapon to try and make the narratives on India. So I would like to start with an evolution, try to understand an evolution of identity in India and tracing it from the earliest periods. And I ask the question, when there's no other, why would there be need for an identity? Well, we know that from our earliest times, we had hundreds and thousands of rishis from tens of thousands of years ago who embarked on huge questions to understand the ultimate reality, ultimate identity. They ask questions like, what is the purpose of life? What is the goal of life? And these investigations led our rishis to great philosophical truths, and they've expounded this many thousands of years ago, and they've come to us today with our gurus and our masters, some of whom are shown over here in this slide. Great truths like Tattvamasi, thou art that, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman, and so on. So it's very clear that this civilization has understood the ultimate identity, which means divisions are meaningless in a sense because of the nature of the ultimate identity that we possess. History shows us that there has been an evolution of philosophical identities. We know that in very ancient times, the idea was we were all in this together in the notion of Brahman. And from the ancient to classical times, we saw an evolution into notions like Astika and Nastika, where Astika was our traditional Nyaya, Samkhya, Vaisheshika, Yoga, Mimamsa, Vedanta. And Nastika was Buddhism, Jainism, Charvaka, Ajivaka, Jnana, and others. And we also see today there's a tendency to categorize many of these into these broad frameworks that are shown here, the Dharmic civilization, or identities like Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, Sikhs, or in terms of popular Vedanta like Advaita, Dvaita, and so on, or agamic, non-agamic traditions and such things. It's important to note that these are 20th century categorizations brought about by Indologists, and there is no consensus, even in ancient times, when people sought to understand what is Astika and what is Nastika. It is clear there was a lot of overlap between the philosophies. It is not a clear-cut one where you could say this is this and that is that and that kind of an understanding. So one has got to take these kind of categorizations with a pinch of salt. It's not exactly the same. We also see in Indian history that an identity has been forced on us. It can be thought of as an anti-reflection of the othering effect of people who saw us. From ancient times till 711 current era, the popular thinking was, we are one, Brahman, Astika, Nastika identities. And there's no conflict at all. Everybody coexisted very well. And the notion was, geographical notion was Bharat, Bharatvarsha, and people saw themselves in this manner. From 711 current era to present, with the conquest by the Arabs and the Turkic people who brought about one book, one God, and one way, we became the other. And identities like Kafir and Mushrik were forced upon the Indian populace. And going on from Vasco da Gama's times, 1498 to present times, the colonialists came with the notion of one God, one way, and they made us again the other, and the other was pagan, casteist, idolater, Aryan, Dravidian, polytheist, and so on. And today we seem to have inherited a terrible mishmash of identities. If you look at India from 1947 to present, the government evolved eventually into something called secular, which declared itself equidistant from all religions, but found itself in bed with vested interests, academia, and Marxists. And it tended to look at the Hindu population as this mishmash that is shown here with primarily the casteist identity that you're Aryan, Brahmin, forward caste, Dravidian, backward caste, Dalit, SC, ST, and things like Brahmin privilege or Brahmin patriarchy were bandied about in a lot of people. What we also see is the government, via the creation of unequal laws, creation of disincentives to being Hindu, creation of bigoted laws, institutionalizing distortions and divisions, has created spurious identities, tensions, and destruction. This is what we see as a very, very unfortunate consequence of the way history has evolved in defining our identities. I also put this slide here to show there's a correlation of identity with the economy also. If you take a look at this picture, this shows Angus Madison graph that shows from the year 0 or 1 all the way to 2003. The Indian economy seems to drop down. The upward arrows, blue arrows, are the ones propping up the economy, positive forces. The red arrows downwards are pushing the economy down. And we can see that early identity of Bharat was there in India for the longest time, if you can call that a political identity. Somewhere around 711 or so, when Islam came in and Sindh and other areas, we started seeing the destruction of temples, libraries, scholars, genocides, and so on. And in reaction, kingdoms like Vijayanagar Empire came along, and they first started using the word Hindu. They recognized that we are Hindu, and so the notion of Hindu mapping to themselves came about in the Vijayanagar kingdom. And from the onset of the Mughals, a great downfall in the Indian economy and Maratha consolidation. And when the British came along, a very great downfall. Along with this downfall came notions like Aryan and Dravidian. These identities also came because along with the British came ethnocide and famines, and also these coincidental identity creations. In the new India, there is what I call neo-ethnocide, and we see the creation of new identities. And we'll take a look at this. So we need to ask now the question, what has been the impact of this manufacturing of the other? What has that done to us in India? How has that meant how people look at us? Well, today we see there is non-stop hate and attacks on the Hindu identity. Very, very unfortunate. But you see, these are not ragtag groups, but these are well-organized cabals with huge funding abroad and within the country that have got into this kind of activity. Over here you see a connection of the Om symbol with the swastika, the Nazi swastika, and linking it up with Hindutva, and along with unfortunate rape incidents and linking it up with Hindu Rashtra, and with people saying smash Brahmin, patriarchy, whatever that is, and so-called women will destroy Hindu Rashtra, and showing our divinity. This is from a painting in a Loyola College in Chennai, showing female divinities under assault with the Me Too hashtag, and of course, EVR from the South. We see that there is enormous non-stop hatred and attack on the Hindu identity. And we also see that media, universities have turned out to be hotbeds of Hindu phobia. For example, over here, where there's a lot of issues that have been tied up and made into something called Students Against so-called Hindutva ideology, so-called interfaith, inter-university, and what they call progressive, inverted quotes. And you also see that the media has jumped into this BBC World Service, for example, in carefully choreographed imagery showing a woman hugging an elephant. In this case, the attack has been on temple elephants, which are apparently tortured. And you also see attacks on festivals, for example, Holi against Hindutva, signed by signatories from various universities. So what we're seeing is media, universities, and others have been nurturing this notion of Hindu phobia and attacks. Closer home, even our own children are being victimized in the United States. Here is an example when Vivek Agnihotriji was invited to Rutgers University. They faced enormous backlash. And this is a note from the president of the Hindu Council, a young student over there. She says, we are a bunch of teenagers, 20-year-olds facing tremendous backlash on Twitter. Entire organizations, movements, professors, clubs, political parties are rallying against us. We are scared. The receiving end of targeted hate crimes. We are disenchanted, disillusioned, and disgusted. Rutgers is facing a lot of anti-Hindu pressure, and from professors like Trishke, for example, here, and others, as well as anonymous and hate-based organizations. Now, it is not as if Rutgers is the only place. We see the story repeating itself in many major universities in the United States, where there is now a tendency to link up things from the Hindu identity in a very negative narrative. And there is a lot of hate. There is so much of hate that our children are afraid to express their identity on campus or on social media because of fear of ridicule from their peers. All of us remember the infamous California textbook controversy, 2017. These headlines show part of the story over here, where Hindus urged the California State Board to reject textbooks due to negative images. And immediately media and other vested interests formed as a wall to try and monolith attack on this whole notion, where they purportedly put a one-sided viewpoint why Hindu groups are against California textbook changes, but entirely demolishing, not even hearing the other side what the issues are, but conflating their own views into this whole thing. And the notorious Caravan magazine that comes and says the latest skirmish reveals the mounting influence of Hindutva in the United States. The Salon magazine, for example, positioning this whole thing as a struggle between Hindu nationalists and marginalized people. And at the core of this is a group called the South Asia Faculty Group, ironically erasing the notion of India, coming in with a spurious identity called South Asia, and rejecting once again any legitimate, genuine concern that our students feel in the classrooms as a consequence of a negative portrayal of Hinduism. So one can see that the situation is exceedingly bad today. We can't sugarcoat this anymore. It is a very bad situation. We need to ask the question, how did we get here? Which agencies are complicit in manufacturing such an identity, and why did they do that? Today we see there are things like caste identity, religious identity, regional identity, Aryan Dravidian, language identity, Indo-American, South Asian, and some people come and say, I'm South Asian, North Indian, Tamilian, Dravidian, backward caste, atheist, not Hindu, world citizen, corporate citizen, and such things. And the question again comes, who is pulling these strings? Clearly the strings are being pulled, and there are people who are like puppets who are trying to mouth these same things being pushed on them. It's interesting and not interesting. It's critical and urgent to understand who are these people pulling these strings, why, and is there any kind of truth behind these narratives? And we see the earliest identity frameworks came along with the colonialists. Colonial hegemony through the Portuguese, Dutch, French, and British came hand in hand with Christian imperialism from 1500s to present through people like, for example, Caldwell and Geo Pope. And it came again hand in hand with Eurocentric scholarship, which brought about linguistics, anthropology, and the notion of caste through people like Max Muller and Herbert Leslie, to try and force certain identities, early identities in the Hindu people, typically with the notion of Aryan invasion of migration theory. If we think that these are ancient and these are not relevant to us today, we have to think again, because these old frameworks have been fortified and pushed on us even more strongly today. Today, we see that universities have jumped and pounced on this theory, embraced it and held it close to themselves, and using ethics sociology methods, importing foreign lenses to look at the Indian polity. They look at all of Indian class dynamics and the notion of oppressor, oppressed, and these kind of notions. These notions are fortified with archaeology, people like Maria Gimbutas, Colin Renfrew, and others from 1800s to present, and with notions of genetics today with professors like David Reich and others. All of these things have got a direct impact on who we are as Hindus. So we need to understand these frameworks and try to correct the record over here. I put in over here the notion of ethnocide of Indians, the identity destruction. UNESCO in 1981 came to the declaration saying, ethnocide means an ethnic group is denied the right to enjoy, develop, and transmit its own culture and language, whether collectively or individually, involves an extreme form of massive violation of human rights, in particular the right of ethnic groups to respect for their cultural identity. And what I'm claiming is that there was ethnocide of Indians by the British, and these are the methods that they applied. 5 mechanisms: the creation of widespread poverty, the destruction of identity via manufactured caste, destruction of identity via distorted history, destruction of religion via missionary activity, destruction of education system via the introduction of English. And I've talked about this at length in several of my talks. I'll quickly recap over here. British creation of poverty. I'm showing 3 academics over here. One is Angus Madison, who shows that India had a huge share of the world GDP in the year 1, falling to a very small value. But what is more interesting is during the colonial period, when Indian economy was falling, it coincided with the rising of the Western Europe, the colonialists. So the transference of wealth from India into Western Europe is suggested by this curve. Will Durant is another scholar who wrote this book, Case for India, and he notes that the British racked up a huge national debt for India. He visited India around 1930 or 1929. When he left India, he says the British had racked up a debt of $3.5 billion for India. And after this was World War II, and by the time World War II was over, this figure was much bigger. And this is Utsa Patnaik, who recently came out with the thesis that the British Raj had siphoned out $45 trillion from India over a collective period of time. So 3 academics with the same story over here. And the second part of ethnocide is colonial conception of caste. So there is enormous literature out there. People like Herbert Risley, who's an anthropologist, use a discredited race science using the ratio of width and height of the nose to classify. And he saw so many colors. Each of these colors is a race. So he saw this many races in India. He entrenched the notion of Aryans as a race, entrenched the notion of caste. He was a census commissioner. In 1901, he stratified the notion of caste. People had to declare their caste. Indians had Jati, Varna, and if you will, Gotra also. But they never, ever was it supposed to be a rigid classification system. But he stratified this, forced Indians to declare what he called as caste, the Portuguese imported word casta. And from then on, we have had this distorted notion of caste. Please do read Breaking India, as well as Nicholas Dirk's Castes of Mind, which talk a lot about this. In terms of destroying the Indic education system, we have an excellent book, Beautiful Tree by Dharampalji, so please do read that. I've already talked about poverty, but one of the direct consequences of poverty was it destroyed the ethnic education system across the country. The way the Pathshalas were supported in temples by local populations who gave a portion of the produce of the temples to support education. After impoverization of the country, they could no longer do that, and that fell. That came at the same time as the English Education Act in 1835, where Macaulay brought about the teaching of English. And a consequence of that was the stopping of publications of books in Sanskrit and Arabic. Funds were used only for the propagation of English. And this led to the suffocation of Sanskrit and the rise of a class of deracinated elites who looked down upon the classical languages of India. And such a distancing from Sanskrit meant a pervasive break from the past, and Indians could no longer connect to their roots. Another form of ethnocide that is seen is a distortion of history. I've spoken about this at length in my talks. So this bigoted narrative says Aryans invaded India in 1500 BCE. These pastoral people brought in Sanskrit caste system, and the original inhabitants of the Dravidians driven south. Aryans imposed a Vedic religion. and they oppressed the Dravidians of Brahminical priesthood, and this oppression caused poverty and backwardness, and Dravidians a separate race and religion. So this is the distortion of history. And today I say there are 5 agencies that are allied in distorting Indian history, starting with the colonialists, soon followed by Eurocentric academics who brought in linguistics and other notions to talk about Indian history, with the vested interests, primarily the church, missionaries, and so on, who had a stake in the narration of Indian history. Today, with liberal, so-called liberal academia, who bring in alien lenses to study everything in Indian context, followed by today the education system is governed by the Marxists, and they have their own vested interests in bringing in a certain kind of narrative. So the hijacking of history and mapping it with their ideologies has meant a massive subversion of identity as far as we as Indians are concerned. One more unfortunate aspect of our civilization has been the monotheist violent attack on the Indian civilization identity. We can't ignore this impact. From the year 711 to 1700s, despots like Bin Qasim, Ghazni, Ghori, Delhi, Sultanate, Bahmani Sultanate, the Mughals, Tipu, Nizam, and others, through processes of destruction of temples, libraries, institutions, and so on. 50 million plus is supposed to have died in this time frame. From 1500s to present, there was a Christian European aggression on Indian civilization, Goan Inquisition, destruction of temples by the Portuguese, French, and the ethnocide I talked about, leading to impoverishment and 80 million deaths due to famine and epidemics, and obviously the destruction of education systems, research systems, economic systems, everything. This ethnocide was wiping out just about everything in the Indian context. If we think this is history, unfortunately, that is still not true. We see that today, from 1947 till now, the government, academia, media, and NGOs and religious groups still work to get rid of Hindus. The government discriminates by a process of bringing in unequal laws, and through a process of appeasement, it infringes on the rights of the Hindus. The academics, media, and NGOs, they appropriate the adhikara, the message of Hinduism, and they distort the message through their bigoted translations and understandings, and they directly create and manufacture the notion of a bigoted identity for Indians. Religious groups, they have the victimhood story with the persecution and proselytization that change the demographics. All these forces are acting as a consequence of the Western identity narrative and evangelist pressures. One such example is the United States Commission for International Religious Freedoms. Groups like this apply pressures through the various entities, the government, and they have their agents in academia, media, and NGOs, as well as agents in religious groups. And this is the end effect of what is going on over here. Today, this is an unfortunate situation that we see. Forces are launching hostile attacks by deracination, distortion, erasures. So we see that the ecosystem, the Hindu ecosystem, whether it is temples, whether it is universities, whether it is schools or sacred spaces, all these are invaded. Whether it is cultural practices, the marks that you wear as a Hindu, the festivals that you celebrate, Deepavali, the Ganesh Chaturthi, Holi, or others, the foods that you eat, these are all under attack. Your identity is perverted, distorted, and shamed, Brahminical patriarchy, a privilege, and these kinds of things. Your history has been distorted, and that too is under attack. So this is an unfortunate situation of where we have landed. I have traced from history where we were, what our identity is, and how we have landed over here. So it begs the question in this looking ahead under 50 years, how do we reclaim the Hindu identity? What are the actions at individual and institutional levels? Very first thing at the individual level, we need each of us as ambassadors to exemplify Dharma as a logical, rational, responsible system with a lot of solutions for the global problems of today, whether it is climate change or any other things. We have solutions if we had a dharmic lifestyle. So we need to practice, learn about Hinduism from books, videos by gurus, celebrate festivals, explain to kids, observances, visit temples, we support scholars, institutions, temples. We need to vote sensibly and hold our elected officials to promises. We need to avoid using loaded Abrahamic terms, use Sanskrit non-translatables. In social media activism, share the thoughts of work leaders, highlight and shame bigotry and hatred. Wherever bigotry raises its head, shame them that they're not being so-called liberal or progressive. Contest and correct the spurious narratives. Institutions, big and small, Chinmaya Mission, Ramakrishna Mission, the Hindu political parties, and so on and so forth. In addition to the regular activities, they can organize conferences such as this, or outreach, talks by scholars, publications, activism, legal activism, exceedingly important. Develop coursework, offer courses, nurture scholars, and create a Hindu ecosystem, economic Hindu ecosystem where we can support people like Hindu scholars, Hindu study professors, and such people. There is a role for Hindu industrialists. We need to be at the forefront of funding Hindu causes through corporate responsibility and other vehicles. We need to support, the industrialists need to support and strengthen the institutions, support the legal and political activism, support students entering administrative and other cadres, support employment and entrepreneurship. And most important, industrialists should not become like this, where declare people who are corporate responsible positions declare Hinduism must be jettisoned for progress. Very, very unfortunate. There's a role also finally for government and elected officials. They need to pass laws that criminalize anti-Hindu behavior, rid public offices of Hindu-phobic forces, review all the constitutional provisions used to discriminate against Hindus, free the temples from government control, remove discriminatory laws such as right to education, the superstition bill, and other laws that prevent Hindu identity and expression, revamp text to purge the communist, leftist, alien biases and ground it in a dharmic Indic framework. And most important, we need to declare the dharmic classical India as our national heritage. We need to declare that it has got endangered status today by all the hostile forces I've shown, and we need to institute protections. So that is my conclusion. India historically is a knowledge-based civilization. The Hindu education, heritage, expression, and geography shows a relentless downward trend for 2000 plus years towards extinction. The war of civilizations has come to our doorstep right now. Hindu expression is outlawed in its own homeland, India. Spurious identities are created to distort and destroy. Breaking India efforts are accelerating thanks to multiplicative effort of technology and generations of deracinated people. There's an urgent need by us at the individual, institutional, and government level to reclaim the identity and correct this message. That is the end of my talk. Thank you very much for your patience in listening to me. Pranams.